this is our discussion on shadow work. So I'm just going to give you a little background about me for those of you who only met me tonight. I started shadow work about 20 years ago with my mentor, who, she didn't call it shadow work. She called it self-care, she called it self-development, she called it accountability. And that's what shadow work really is. It's a process of accountability. And it wasn't until I started taking other courses and working with other people. I started working with Christina Pratt from the Last Mask Center, and she goes deep into the shamanic aspect of shadow work. And I started working with a couple of other practitioners who didn't necessarily call it shadow work, it's more shamanic work. And so what I'm going to go through with you guys today is, what is it, how do you do it, and really what it takes, the dedication that you'll need to dive in. I've gone through it with Erin and with Stacy. We've gone through it together. And I highly recommend, anytime you do this kind of work, is that you do it with somebody that you trust, someone that can guide you. Either that's somebody who has a degree in it, either the Jungian side or the shamanic side, someone who can help you process things, because you'll dig into a lot of deep stuff. And just like I mentioned before, it is about personal accountability. It's about taking everything that, the patterns, the turmoil, the resistances, the resentments in your life, and analyzing them, taking a microscope to them. So what is the shadow? The shadow is pieces of ourself. And if you're looking at the Jungian psychology method of it, and he only coined this in like 1950s-ish, and he looked at it as pieces of ourselves that we disown. And that's a very accurate assumption or description of it. But to be fair, our ancestors have been working with the shadow for centuries. They always recognized that we had a piece of ourselves that we didn't quite own, or that we would kind of shove aside to make others happy for whatever reason. So when we create shadow within ourselves, we're creating these aspects of ourselves that we push aside to maintain health, wellness, well-being. It could come from our the message could come from our caregivers that, oh, ladies don't act like that. Good girls don't speak out. There's a number of things. I know the programming we all have experienced. So when you're dealing with the shadow, you're taking that little girl inside of us, or the little boy, and talking to them, treating them as part of you. It's a living entity, a living energy that is part of you. And you're coaxing them back into the light so that you can mend that relationship with yourself. And that's where the personal accountability comes in, because you have to be responsible for you. Nobody else is going to solve this for you. You can go to counselor after counselor, therapist after therapist, therapy after therapy. But if you're not addressing the part of you that has been banished and locked away and chastised and condemned, you're never going to heal that part of you. But once you start healing that part of you, oh my gosh, the world opens up. Everything opens up. So working with the shadow, what it takes is a daily dedicated practice, and that's what I teach. So I teach the more shamanic view of it. So we go into journey work. You meet your guides. You work with your guides. You work with ancestors. You work with energies that will help open you up and crack that shell so that you can see, oh, okay, I have this pattern in my life. Say it's you have trouble saving money. I have this pattern in my life where I can't save money no matter what. Every time I get money in, it goes right out. I have this pattern because of this trauma in my life. I was taught that money was bad. I was taught that money was evil. I was taught that people that had money were evil and rotten and bad and selfish and greedy, right? So when we go back and start pulling at those threads, and sometimes they go down the mother line. They're much deeper ingrained than just this lifetime. You know, maybe it's our mothers that were taught by the grandmothers and the great-grandmothers and so on and so on and so on. So when we get into shadow work, we are looking at those influences and we're digging deep, getting to the roots of the plant that's dying. And I look at it from a different perspective. I don't look at it from the psychological perspective necessarily, although that's part of my training. I look at it also from the esoteric, the magical, the energetic aspect of it. I am an Utsui Reiki master and a Celtic Reiki master, and I incorporate those into my practice. I incorporate the idea of journey work, the idea of using the energy of our lines to bring us to where we need to be today, to heal the past, to heal those threads, break the generational curses and that sort of thing. So when you're preparing for shadow work, you want to start getting honest with yourself. And this is the toughest part. So when we start looking at our patterns, we start looking at the habits that we're forming, the people we keep in our lives, the influences we connect to. When you're on Facebook, what are the things you start latching onto? Oh, yeah, she's horrible for doing that because she's always been horrible. Why? What is the purpose of that? What happened in your life that convinced you that you were at war with everyone? And as women, particularly, and I can speak from experience, that we are taught to be at war with one another constantly. We have to be better than her over there. We have to have the better hair, the better clothes, the better nails, the better shoes, the better purse, whatever. And so that is the collective shadow. And right now we are living in the collective shadow. It is revealing itself. And I'm reading a book recommended by Erin called Burning Woman. And she eloquently states how we are the immature male and immature female in this world right now. And we are living in the collective shadow with the purpose of becoming the mature female and male so that we can dissolve that. But we have to start with us first. We can't dissolve the collective without working here first. So when you're working towards shadow work, what I first recommend is find people that you trust to talk to that can help you process it. Maybe they're going to take the journey with you and start looking at bad habits, bad mindsets, familial patterns, that sort of thing, that you trust, someone you can talk to, that if you journal something and you need to process it, you can process it with them. You need to then be compassionate with yourself. Be absolutely loving with yourself. And this is hard because we're so hard on ourselves. I mean, have you ever listened to how we talk to ourselves in our head? Would we ever say that to somebody else in our life? No. We would not utter the words that we say to ourselves to other people. So that's part of shadow work, is resolving those patterns that we get into, because that's how we're taught, we're trained to. And it is owning our faults. And as we go on, you'll discover that what we've been told are our faults are probably actually our strengths. They're probably actually something that is powerful in you, but someone else decided that it wasn't either good enough, or it was too much, or it was too loud or too flamboyant, whatever. So the faults that you'll start observing in yourself will be those things where you're like, well, really? Okay, so I talk loud. Is that a fault? Or is that a gift so that if I have to speak in a crowd, I can? I have a knack for being creative. Is that a fault? Or is that something I can harness and use to my advantage? And then, of course, you want to start observing your triggers. And I'm going to define triggers here. There's triggers, then there's emotions you must feel. Okay? They're not the same thing. A lot of people mix that up. Oh, you made me feel bad. That's not a trigger, that's just a feeling. So in shadow work, you need to start feeling the feelings, not judging them, not chastising them, but allowing yourself to feel them. Allow them to come over you like a wave and then wash right through you so you understand it, so you can comprehend it. What caused that? Why did I feel that way? What is it that triggered me to act out after feeling that feeling? Because there's your trigger, is the way you act, the way you respond, the way you lash out. I have a lot of snake medicine. I get triggered, I lash, and I attack. I'm very upfront and honest with that. It's one of my shadows that I'm working to resolve, to be more, okay, step back, take a breath. And it gets harder and harder the more somebody attacks you or interferes in your space, right? So the Jungian shadow, he gives us archetypes. So let me back up a little bit. So journaling is going to be your best friend in shadow work. And you guys can pass these around because these are hilarious. I love the chaos one because that works with shadow work, is the whole idea of chaos. But your journal, I know a lot of people hate journaling. I hated it too when I first started. Now I love it. I journal every day. And my journal is on this thing now. So I've upgraded or side graded, whatever, to an iPad. So I use like GoodNotes on my iPad and I journal there. So, but so let's talk about journaling, because a lot of people go, journaling, oh my God. Make it fun. I use stickers. I use little quotes and motivations and stuff like that. Or I write myself notes. Like we have an app on our phone called The Pattern, and it's an astrology app that will connect you with your friends, and it basically calls you out every day is what it does.
Yes, it does.
So I will journal what it's calling me out on, and I'll be like, the pattern's calling me out again today. And just funny things like that. Like, I try to keep it real, but I try to also keep it light. So I'm not, because you'll send yourself into a downward spiral when you're trying too hard to be too serious, or we can send ourselves into that bit of depression if we allow it. So part of what I teach is how to get in it, realize it, but then pull yourself out. Here's an activity. Here's something you can do so you're not downward spiraling and feeling completely helpless or completely unable to pull yourself out. Because the shadow work, for me, and what I teach, it's about being able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and keep going. And I'll be honest, we would not be here today if I was not able to do that. 10 years ago, we were in an awful spot. I was deep in my shadow, sitting on my stairs at home bawling because we couldn't pay the bills and we couldn't, get shoes for the kids or buy groceries, all that stuff. It was that moment in my deepest, lowest, darkest point where I said, bullshit, this needs to stop. And I decided I was gonna start digging deep and going back to my training and get more training. So now I have a certificate as a shadow master and working with Christina Pratt and her genre of shadow work. So if I did not do that for myself, if I did not recognize where I was and pull myself up, we would not be here today. We wouldn't have this space where we can heal and grow together. So in the Jungian psychology, Carl Jung, he likes to categorize everybody in their shadow. I see how this relates, but I don't quite agree with it because I think it pigeonholes people, because we're more than just one thing. But the way he does categorize it helps. So he gives everybody, he has 12 archetypes related to the shadow. So like the innocent, for one. His innocent, the motivation is safety. They're trying to create safety. And their journey is e-spiritual. So it's not really the spiritual journey. It's the shadow of that, though, becomes the victim. They become over-giving, over-caring. They give too much of themselves, and then they can't break away from that. Oh, everybody needs me. If I don't do this, everything's going to fall apart. So they make themselves that pillar in the family unit or in the friend circle, in the social circle, the business even, where they can never ever walk away because they don't allow anybody else to be responsible. They are solely responsible. So this is how our shadow can play games with us. We think, oh, well, I've got it together. I know what's going on, so I have to do it. But in reality, we're telling ourselves stories and pigeonholing ourselves into a situation where we're pretty miserable. We might not think we're miserable, but we can be pretty miserable. And I'm guilty of that too. I do it at my house. If I don't do it, nobody else will do it. but I don't, so I'm learning to walk away. And maybe it gets done, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't matter that much. So those are some examples of how Carl Jung kind of created these archetypes of titles that relate to the shadow. So another one is the jester, and their motivation is pleasure. And they want to connect with each other, so that's what they're trying to do. But the shadow side of that is they become the trickster. They sabotage relationships. People get annoyed with them because they're constantly playing a joke, or they're never serious. They can't seem to take anything seriously. They're at a funeral and they're laughing type of person, right? So those are some examples of how Carl Jung demonstrates the shadow. Now, like I said before, the shadow work that I teach focuses on treating your shadow as if it is a piece of you that is alive, energy that is within you, that is locked in a cage somewhere. It's in prison because you put it there. You put it in prison. Maybe you did it as a child, not realizing that this is a piece of you that has a strength, because you were told by grandmother, mother, good girls don't act that way. Good girls don't scream and shout. Good girls don't ride bikes. Good girls don't do this, whatever. So we work on one aspect. I try not to go too many because it can become overwhelming. And this is why shadow work is a lifelong process. We work on one thing at a time, and we dig deep into that. So, maybe your shadow is a piece of yourself that is a highly creative and intuitive person. A piece of yourself that you just tucked away because maybe as a child you saw ghosts, or you were able to talk to people that weren't there, or maybe you were able to divine things that people didn't want you to know, and so you were chastised for it. So what we do is we try to pull that back in and try to reconnect you with that intuition, with that creative force, with that person that knows the things she should know, that you should know, so you can connect with your full purpose in this life. So what I focus on is living with your shadow, finding out what are her strengths, what are her weaknesses, why are you better with her than you were without her? So what was it that somebody said or did that made you think that part of you was bad or negative? And I'm not talking about like genuine mental disorders. I'm talking about pieces of ourself that are not harmful. They're not doing any bad to anybody. They were just a piece of us that somebody didn't approve of. Maybe you did like to wear short skirts because you have nice legs. That's not a bad thing. You have nice legs. Why aren't you allowed to do what you want to do with your body? That type of thing. And then we go over you honoring your triggers and honoring those emotions that come up that lead to triggers. We also work with grounding the energy that can be very over the top and overwhelming. I also teach daily ceremonies, daily rituals that you can incorporate into your daily practice that help reinforce what you do. And to me, that's the biggest part, is you want a daily practice. So let's talk about radical coherence for a moment. This is a funny story. Erin's heard it, Stacey's heard it. So when I first started, I started writing, what I'm looking at right now is my book that I've written. So I'm looking at the table of contents so I can remember what to talk to you guys about. And so when I started writing this book and writing the course that we're going to start in August, I asked my guides, I said, why am I doing this? What's my why? What's the purpose of this? Why is this important for me to bring to other people? And I got 2 words, radical coherence. And I'm like, what does that mean? I came out of my journey and I'm like, guys, seriously, I need more. So I went back in and they showed me this vision. It was a beautiful vision of a voodoo priest in his white gowns, his white garb, with a beautiful altar in front of him, which is decorated with white linens and candles and pictures of ancestors and beads and flowers and little shots of alcohol everywhere. And then the vision of the priest taking a big swig of his bourbon and then spraying it over the altar as an offering. And I'm a practitioner, previous practitioner of Southern Conjure, so I understood what that was. Then it immediately cut the scene. They cut it to this next priest who was thin and scraggly, and his clothes were all dirty and disheveled, and the altar, like some of the pictures were knocked over, the glasses were knocked over, the flowers were dying. It was like just a horrible scene. And he takes his bourbon in his mouth, and he starts to cough and sputter, and it just dribbles out his chin. And then I hear radical coherence again. And I was like, okay, my guys have a sense of humor for one. And I get it. This path is about bettering ourselves through that dedication, through the process, through teaching ourselves how to be magnificent. Even when we feel at our lowest, we can still be magnificent. And it's not about being perfect. It's about doing the best we can with what we have. And that's what that message was. And to really like stick to it. So part of the shadow work that I teach is going into that liminal space where you're connecting with guides, where you're talking with your guides. You're meeting one guide in particular that will lead you through your shadow work process, that will be the one to protect you from energies that maybe you're not ready to handle, or energies that might be out to harm. These will be your shadow guardians. And I also touch on shadow teachers. We have shadow teachers in our life right now. I've had a few in my life, and they teach the hard lessons, but like we just talked earlier, sometimes those hard lessons lead you to something far better. And sometimes you have to be burned with fire in order to find the wellspring of prosperity so that you can move on and do the things you need to do. And before we leave the class, before we're done with our time together in the 6-week course, we will talk about dealing with blockages, how to maintain. I have a whole system that I set up that is filled with meditations and journal prompts and ideas and practices that you can use. Because, like I said, this is a lifelong journey. You can't just, it's not a magic pill, one and done. This is something you'll do every single day. So I will teach you how to create your own rituals with your guides so that you can move forward and make it a solid foundation. Does anybody have any questions about it? So the course is going to be, and that's probably a question, what's the course? Go ahead.
Is it also considered self-love as well?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's self-love, self-care. Shadow work, I think, is the ultimate self-care and self-love, because
that's what me and my therapist are talking about.
Okay, awesome, yeah. And we need that. We need to care for ourselves intimately. The whole you can't pour from an empty cup idea, that was a hard one for me to learn through this journey. I'm like, I can just keep going. I still do it. No comments from the peanut gallery over there. But I feel like I can do more now than I ever could because I keep refilling that cup. I mentioned before we started here that I could not have helped build this sanctuary without having my own sanctuary at home. I have a moon room that I sit in and I journal and I read and decompress from the day. It's quiet, I can shut the door and sometimes people don't bother me, but but that's where I go to sit and be with me, just me. And that's gonna be an important part of the shadow work journey, is learning to be with yourself and to be okay with that you don't need other stimuli. You don't need other people telling you you're okay. You don't need anybody validating you, because you're all you need. Now, when you get into that space, this is the great part of it, is when you get in that space where you finally realize that you are all you need, suddenly the people that will only help you grow and expand further just pop into your life. And you develop these amazing relationships and sisterhoods that you never thought were possible before. Like, I always thought, I don't get along with girls. I can't be friends with girls. And now I have 2 amazing partners and friends that, I can't imagine my life without them now, because we work so well together And I only attribute that to the work I've done until this time and the work I continue to do. So the course that I'm talking about, what I teach, it's a 6-week course, and it starts August 27th. It's a weekly 6-week course. We have live options here, but then I also have online, on demand, go at your own pace, recorded options. So if you're interested in that, we can give you more information about that. It's on our website too if you want to check it out later. So any other questions?
What's the name of this course?
Claiming the Shadow. Do we have any questions online?
Not yet.
No?
I'll
Okay.
let you know. We have some comments,
Okay.
but no questions.
Okay.
And the comments are just, thank you, this is awesome.
Okay. I'm glad. So, let me go over some other things. Okay. So within the course, we also use crystals and herbs and other items that will help, just help you with the journey. So I was reading today, I got these new books that I really love. And the first one I opened to, when I'm thinking about tonight, what I'm gonna say, and the first one I opened to was Rainbow Obsidian. Or actually Obsidian, so it includes the Rainbow Obsidian. And what it was saying was so spot on. So this is Crystallary by Maya Toll, or Mia Toll?
Maya.
Maya. And it was talking about how obsidian is an uncompromising mirror, and it helps surgically, it's a surgical sharp blade. So when you cut obsidian, you can get the arrowheads and that sort of thing out of them. And growing up, obsidian was huge in my family. My grandmother and my grandfather were both Native Americans. We had turquoise and obsidian everywhere. And the obsidian was my favorite. I would just sit for hours and just look through them. And it was almost like I was looking through another world when I was looking through them. So obsidian is one of the great crystals for doing shadow work because it's a mirror to the soul and it'll cut through the bullshit. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're going right here with the shadow work, is you want to cut through that bullshit. You don't want to lie to yourself anymore. We do it too often. We're told to do it. We're told that it's okay to do it. Another one is labradorite. That one's really good. And of course, amethyst. I think those are really good crystals for a lot of different workings. Of course, self-love, so the rose quartz. And there's the rainbow obsidian. And then Stacy picked out malachite for us, and this one is about transformation. And then the golden healer, I just love the name of it, golden healer. And this one clears the minds and opens up communication. So I know sometimes when you're doing shadow work, that clear communication in your head, the ego gets in the way. You're gonna because the ego's job is to keep you safe, to keep you in the status quo. So when we're doing shadow work, that ego voice, that inner mean girl, she'll be in your ear constantly. What are you doing? Who do you think you are? What makes you think you can do this? Who are you? And so that one's a good one. To shut her up. And then smoky quartz is another really good one. This one can help ground you, and it raises your vibration while meditating. And meditation is another good practice for shadow work because we want to go within. We need to get to know ourselves really well during doing this work. So those are some of the things I wanted to share with tools you can use. The things you can use to really dig deep and do this on your own if you needed to. I mean, if you don't have anybody you can trust, you can do it on your own. I don't recommend it because it gets tough. So having somebody you can talk to, process things with is important. That's why I offer this class, so that you have somebody that's trusted, that's been through it, in a safe space where you can field questions and bounce things off, or maybe even just get a different perspective on things. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for people who don't have a quiet space in their own house?
Your car. Yeah, if you don't have a space in your own home, I know you have that situation. Like you have young kids, or maybe your family's not as respectful of your needs as they should be. If you can, go for a walk. Find a tree that you can sit under where there's nobody, especially early in the morning if you can, when there's not too many people out and about. Nature is a great healer, and when we spend time in nature, we can really learn a lot. You can go to your car if you have to. Sit in your car alone. Turn on the air, especially in this heat. I don't want you suffocating yourself with the dog in the car. But find those little areas in your day. Like maybe you can sneak home when there's nobody there. Or, you can always come here. If you need a space, we can reserve time and you can come here and just sit. Because usually it's pretty quiet. Especially like during the week, it's pretty quiet. We always have the table sitting there. You can sit and journal and have a cup of tea. It's all good. This is a safe space for everybody. Yeah.
So you were saying about being alone. So what if you feel connection with like a pet of yours? Would you feel like it's still important to like not have them around when you're doing that kind of work?
I think our pets are intuitive. I think they know what we need when we need it, when we allow them. And there's another shadow aspect that we all kind of hold on to. It's like we don't always know when to just let go and let somebody else help, let their energy help us. I think pets are a great way to get that helping energy, that empathetic energy that we need. Now I wouldn't like trade them as, use them as your therapist. Although they can be very therapeutic. But sometimes in shadow work you need another voice to bounce things back at you so that you can get a different perspective. Then change that perspective. But yeah, if you're doing shadow work and your pet wants to be there with you, like you're doing a meditation or a ritual and they want to be there with you, yeah, let them. I don't see why not. As long as they're not being chaotic and disruptive, sure. Just like kids, right? The chaos. All right. Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. There's more tea, so help yourself. You can browse around if you'd like.
Where can people find more information about the course?
The course is on symmetryholisticcollective.com. And it's either on our front page or it's on our calendar too. So if you want to check it out and see what's all entailed, we go into a lot of stuff. So the course itself will go into deity work. So I'll introduce you to some deities that are helpful in shadow work. I'll introduce you to rituals and herbs and stones and all kinds of correspondences. Plus I have a whole resource that are meditations, journal prompts, daily activities, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you mentioned an online version as well as an in-person that can both be found in the same
Yeah,
place?
it's all in the same spot.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So when we're finished with our 6-week
Yes.
course,
Okay, so good question. So here's something that I'm playing with right now. I am considering after the 6 weeks doing like a monthly meetup where we come together and just kind of rekindle that fire for the shadow work. So if there's definitely an interest in that after the course or when the course comes to an end, then I will absolutely do that for you guys. Awesome. Well, thank you.
How much is it?
The online version that's do your own is $150. The in-person is $250 for the 6 weeks. All right. Thank you guys. Yeah, there's no more questions. We're done.